Today I'm going to show you how I made this grenade and some of the hard surface techniques I used to make it in ZBrush for iPad. Before we get started, it is worth addressing that ZModeler and some of the other hard surface tools in ZBrush Desktop are not in the iPad version currently, so I'm going to show you all the cheaty hacky things that I did to figure this stuff out, because if you're like me, I like Halo and Star Wars and other things like that, and I want to do that on the iPad instead of just doing organic sculpts all the time. So that being said, we are in ZBrush for iPad just to quickly demonstrate some of the tools that you have here. If you've never used ZBrush iPad before, all of your brushes are going to be in the lower window. We can go to the flatten brush, H trim dynamic, etc. You have all your brush options on the left side of the screen. You have a bunch of different palettes that you can use to adjust your render settings, and you can even add some things here like your Subtools, Alpha, etc. And then on the right side, we have a lot of the standard menus in ZBrush Desktop, such as whether we are going to work in perspective or use an orthographic view. We have our floor that we can turn on and off, our symmetry, etc. Now, rather than just giving you a full tour, let's just go ahead and start making something and hopefully give you an idea of what you can do with it, and that will teach you what buttons to press. So we're going to go to the new sculpt option. So I just went to the home button, and if you go to the home button here, this is probably what you'll end up seeing. We're going to go to new sculpt and click on Dynamesh Sphere. I'm just going to start with the basic sphere project. I'm going to go to the save option, save as, and we'll call this Tut Grenade. Cool. Now to get started, we're going to go up to the top right hand corner here, and we have our subtool menu. And our subtools is basically going to be our, hierarchy of objects inside our ZBrush project. And I don't want a sphere, I want cubes and cylinders and stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the plus symbol, and we're going to add a cylinder like so. Now what I like to do is once I have my cylinder, we can see that as we look at this cylinder, it's giving us a little bit of perspective as if we're looking through a real camera, and I don't want that. If we click on this palette here, and you may not have all of these palettes in this menu, so you can go ahead and hold the three dots here and add a palette, and you can find the camera palette here. I already have mine added, but if we look at the camera, we're currently looking through a 50mm lens. We can change this here to different focal lengths. I personally don't like working like this, so I will turn off my camera palette, move this menu over, and I will turn perspective off with this button right here, this little like crosshair sort of thing. So now we're not working in perspective. Now when it comes to working in hard surface in almost any 3D software, for cylinders, having enough density in your geometry will help you get surface detail. But when you're working with ZBrush and you don't have a lot of the ZModeler tools, we need to find creative ways to create some of the shapes that we want. So I'm going to first go ahead and go to my subtool palette and turn off the sphere because we don't need to see that anymore. And we're going to emulate that first grenade that I showed you. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on this gizmo right here, and this is going to give me my ZBrush gizmo, and with these axes I can scale it up or down, make it wider or larger, etc. And if you click on the outside of your mesh, we can orbit around. Now obviously when we selected this elongated red cube, it's stretching it on the X, and we don't want that, so we can double tap with 2 fingers, and that will undo. We're only going to make this just a little bit taller, like so. And if we want to make this larger as a whole, we can click on the center square, like so, and this will scale up everything on all axes. Now, I have my first cylinder, and this is going to be my base. I'm going to hit the home button. I don't want this to be anywhere but the very center of my object. I'm also going to go to the right hand corner and turn off my floor so I can just see the floor or just the environment as is. Now, when I showed you that previous object, we had more than a handful of cylinders to create the overall primary form. So I could go in and I can hit the plus button and add more cylinders, but I'm lazy. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the control button or if you click on the little menu on the left-hand side over here, these are going to be your modifier keys like in ZBrush for desktop. So the control button is actually also your mask button, but the mask feature in the control button also has some extra features. Like when you have the gizmo open and you hold control or the mask button, we can duplicate an object along the gizmo. So now I have a second cylinder, and we can see that this other cylinder here is now darker, and that's because it's masked. So we're basically duplicating and then not affecting the previous cylinder. That is exactly what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this up just a little higher, and now I'm going to scale it down on the Y, and I'm going to scale it up just a little bit. So then I have my top portion of my grenade like so. Awesome. Now from here, I also want to do this to the bottom. I could also very well hold control and just duplicate a second one, but I'm going to undo that because there's another method that we could use to create this symmetrical top and bottom to our grenade. So to do that, we're going to go up to our little menu in the top right-hand corner, go to Geometry, and under Geometry, there's going to be a menu called Modify Topology, and this Modify Topology will allow us to mirror our object. Now, I don't want to mirror it on X and Y because it's a cylinder, it's already symmetrical on X. Well, I do want to make it symmetrical and mirror it on Y, but not the X. X is fine, so we can just tap on the axes for the mirror and weld and select Y, and then unselect the X, and then hit mirror and weld, and now we have a symmetrical bottom to our little grenade. Awesome. So when we're working with ZModeler, we have to be strategic in how we model some of our primary forms. Now, what I don't want is have all of these objects selected, and I don't want them all in the same subtool. Now, if I go up to my subtool menu, we can see that we have just one object, and we can hold on this and rename it, and we will call this the grenade mid. Cool. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the mask button or the control button with my opposite hand, and then outside of my mesh, I'm going to click and drag and make a mask outside of my mesh. And what that's going to do is that's going to clear my masks. So now if I move this object, it's going to move everything all at once. Now, awesome. I'm going to undo that. So just two fingers and tap on the screen, and then I can use two fingers and hold and just move my camera around like so. So now I'm going to go ahead and hold the Alt button or the plus and minus button, and I'm going to make sure that this gizmo is going to be dead center in the world. And we can see that when we hold the Alt button, this gizmo, the lock icon, becomes unlocked. And now we can hit the little Google Maps pin icon there, and now our little gizmo is directly at world center. Now, all these cylinders, these three cylinders here, are still technically separate objects. What I want to do is make them separate. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and go to my menu in the top right-hand corner and navigate to Polygroups, and I'm going to hit Auto Groups. And what that's going to do is create a group or a selection for all of my objects based on the geometry it's connected to. So the top, middle, and bottom, they're separate. And now from here, what I can do is go up to my subtool menu and go to Split, and I'm going to go to Groups Split. Now we can see that we have three separate pieces for our little grenade here. I'm going to go ahead and close this menu. We can see here that we have a nice, awesome base for this. Now, we're not just going to work with cylinders. Let's go ahead and add a couple other objects to help create this primary form. Now, I'm going to go to my menu in the top right-hand corner, go to my subtool menu, and I'm going to hit the plus sign and add a cube. Now we have a cube directly in the center, but there's a problem with this cube here. I'm going to close this menu and navigate and move my camera around. I'll actually move this cube over. We can see that the geometry of this cube is a little funky and weird, as in it just has this like weird pole at the top, and that's just the default cube in ZBrush. We can approach this cube in a couple of ways because we want to make this actually less dense and actually be even geometry across the board. The first thing we could do is we can go down to this button right here in the lower right hand corner, and this is Z Remesher, and we can set this value to the target polygon to be 0.1. This is basically saying whatever this number is right here, multiply that by 1000. That's how many polygons we're going to try and target. So we're going to say this is about, what, 100 polygons? And now I am also going to go down and I'm going to go ahead and turn on adapt, and I'm going to set adaptive size to 0, and I'm going to set detect edges. Now this is sometimes a little bit of a slot machine or gambling. We don't know if it's actually going to work. I have a couple ways to make this work, but this is just the fastest way to reduce our cube. And now if we look at it, hey, awesome, now we have an even geometry mesh of our cube up here. Sweet. So now I'm going to go ahead and look from the front view, and I'm going to hit the Google Maps pin of our cube with our cube selected, and I'll set this right back into the center. Or, I'm sorry, not the Google Maps, I meant the home button. And from here, what we can do is bring this up just a little bit. Let's scale it down, and I'm going to just position this little object directly in the center, make it a little bit thinner, squash it down, and basically we're making another little like latch pin for this grenade. Cool. But I want to add some of the other details that were at the top of the previous grenade that I made. So I'm going to go ahead and hold Control, and I'm going to duplicate this cube, and I'm going to use this cog wheel here. And this cog wheel will give us the deformation options in ZBrush, but it'll also give us a bunch of other transform properties, things that we can do. One of the benefits about this little cog wheel is that we can also add more shapes, such as a cylinder. We're going to add a cylinder right there. We can see that we have a very tiny cylinder. Where'd it go? Where's the cylinder? We're going to undo that. We're going to try it again. We're going to do polycylinder. And, oh, you know what? It's probably because if I go to the solo button down here, no? Interesting. Unless there is a cylinder. It's just very, very tiny. I'm going to undo that. And we're going to just do that one more time. Add this cylinder. And it's a very, very tiny cylinder. Okay, fine. Awesome. No big deal. So we have a very tiny cylinder. We can see that our little gizmos there are just very tiny and small. We have a couple extra knobs that we can hold to add more geometry to this cylinder. I'm going to use this red arrow and just pull it down so it's a little bit denser. And I'm going to click on the cog wheel again and go back to my Gizmo 3D. Let's zoom out and go back to my center. Turn on my transform gizmo, look from the front, and if I use my gizmo to rotate this, if I hold the shift button or the little finger icon over here, it will allow me to basically increment my rotation by 5 instead of just a freeform rotation. So I'm going to set that to -90, and I'm going to scale this up by a lot, just so that it just fits outside of my little cube there, and then I'm going to put that there like so, and I'm going to unsolo this if I miss the solo button. The solo button is the lower right hand menu over here, this little three circle thing with the solid circle at the top, and I'm going to just position that there. And we're still working in the subtool that has the cube, but we're working in that one subtool with this cylinder. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this cylinder one more time by holding Control, dragging up, and then making it just a little bit smaller like so. Now from here, what I'm going to do is hold Control, and I'm going to tap on the outside, or rather make a mask on the outside, and now we cleared our mask. All of that stuff is together. Now from here, what I can do is I can turn off my gizmo. I'm going to hold Control and make a mask around this. And with this mask here, what I can do is select my gizmo. If I hold Control and tap on the outside, we have now inverted the mask. So anything that's dark, our gizmo is not going to affect, but this gizmo is now going to affect this top little bit right there, and we have our primary form for that already set. So now what I'm going to show you is one of my favorite parts about hard surface in ZBrush, and that's going to be the trim curve, clip curve, etc. So first what we need to do is go back to our polygroups, and we're going to go to auto groups and clear the mask. Come on, dude. There we go. One more time, we're going to go to auto groups, separate all my groups, go to subtool and group split, and it's going to be unhappy. That's okay. Now we can see here that my new selection, my new subtool that I have active is going to be this cylinder down here. The easiest way to switch between subtools is going to be if we hold the Alt button or the plus minus button and then tap on a mesh in our viewport, then we can navigate between different meshes in our ZBrush file. Now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the Alt button again, use 2 fingers to reposition, and we can see that my gizmo is unlocked. I'm going to hit the Google Pin icon to center that up, and then I'm just going to center up my view here. All right. Now, the trim curve, clip curve, all that stuff. Now, if we use the menu, this menu over here, the one on the left-hand side, you could also put it on the right, we have the ability to hold Control or Shift or Control and Shift. And the way you do that is if you hold the Control and then Shift while not lifting up your finger, you can basically keep those buttons active at the same time. And now you'll notice if I turn off my gizmo here, as I press each of these modifier keys, it's going to give us a different set of brushes down here. Now, when we do Control and Shift or Mask and Smooth, the top one is the Smooth, by the way, then we can see that we have an entirely new menu up here. This menu is basically going to give us a bunch of different tools to either hide geometry, hide meshes, cut geometry, etc. So when we work with this, we have this thing called the sliced curve, we have the trim curve, we have the knife curve, and they're all going to do different sort of slicing operations on our mesh. And sometimes I would just play with different ones to figure out which one works best for the model I'm working with. Basically, what we want to do is we want to cut this to give it more of like a hexagon shape. So I'm going to go to my gizmo, I'm going to make it just a little bit wider, maybe just a touch taller, like so. And I'm going to go ahead and go to my Z remesher, and I'm going to set this back to the same settings I had earlier, adapt to size 0, adapt at checked on, and then go ahead and Z remesh this just to make sure that my density of my mesh is even. Now, from here, I'm going to turn off my gizmo, hold Control or the little mask and the smooth, make sure both of those buttons are yellow, orange. I'm colorblind, by the way, so I apologize. And I'm going to go ahead and use the trim curve. Now, if I Control, Shift, and drag on my viewport, we can see here that I have this line appearing. Anything on the dark side, you can see that we have a dotted line and a dark side and a light side. We want to go to the dark side.
You underestimate my power!
And we want to make sure that anything on the dark side of the mesh is going to be cut away. So we can see here that we're not actually affecting the mesh, but if I just go ahead and just drag that there, it's going to slice a portion of our mesh and basically just make a completely new polygroup for us and basically give us a cool looking shape there. Now I'm going to undo that because that's not the exact shape I want, so I'm going to go ahead and first let's see if symmetry will work. I'll hold Control and Shift and then slice right there. We'll go to 135 degrees and slice. Now it didn't keep it symmetrical, and some of these brushes down here will not work with symmetry, but that's very easy. We can fix that in just a second. So we have that cool shape. I'm gonna go ahead and maybe just adjust this shape just a little bit more like so, and I am going to slice my mesh, turn off my gizmo, slice like so. Now, if I don't like the space of where my line is put, we could obviously undo that. But if I hold Control and keeping my thumb on the iPad, and I bring my thumb over to this menu, and it's doing a weird thing, Control Shift, oh, and we also have to make sure we have the line made. While we have the line dragged out, while holding Control and Shift, and we go to the spacebar menu, we can reposition our line there, and once we move our thumb away, we can reposition like so. So I'm going to go like right there, hold shift and maybe just put that right there. And sure, now we have that cut. Awesome. Now I want to mirror this to the other side. The easiest way to do that is we're first going to go to our subtool menu in the top right hand corner. Then we're going to go to geometry, modify topology, and mirror and weld like we did earlier, but we're going to mirror this to the other side. Now mirror and weld does go from left to right, so we can see here that it didn't do what we wanted. So fortunately there's another way we can adjust this. I'm going to go into my deformation menu, and there's this menu called mirror. I'm going to hit mirror, then I go back to geometry, modify topology, and mirror and weld. If you don't see that, first deformation, mirrors at the very top, but geometry, you might start at this part, this top of your geometry menu. You just have to scroll down to modify topology. So now we have that shape, and cool. I have a cool looking shape on the top of my grenade up here. I'm going to undo that and off camera fix the shape just so it looks a little better for my soul. So now we have this shape on the very top of our grenade, and we covered the slice curve, the trim curve, mirror and weld, etc. Now, what if I want to add some extra details to this model, and I don't have ZModeler? This is where the fun part happens. So I'm going to go ahead and hold Alt and select this center grenade here. Now, the reason why modeling in ZBrush without ZModeler, the hard surface tools, is challenging is because we can't actually select any of these polygons individually. We have to find a way to get the shape that we want without actually selecting polygons. So my strategy and my way of selecting all of my geometry here is first I'm going to solo this. We can see here that this cylinder has the top and bottom, obviously, but we only want to select a portion of this. To do that, if we hold the control button, we can see that we can make a mask around our selection here. So I'm going to go ahead and make a mask over like so. And you know what, I'm going to go ahead and turn on my Y symmetry as well. So I'm going to hold the symmetry button over here and select my butterfly and then set Y as well. And when we do that, we can go ahead and select those portions. And then we can see here that it's mirrored on the top and bottom and left and right. And I'm going to select that right there. So now I have this cool shape, and with this what we can do is we can first go to our subtool menu. We're going to go to polygroups, and we're going to scroll all the way down, and there's going to be an option called group masked. So right now we have this selection of our cylinder that's masked, and if I hit group mask, we're going to set a separate polygroup for this. Awesome. So now I need to go into my subtool menu in the top right. I'm going to hold and I'm going to duplicate this. And we're just going to go ahead and rename it just so we stay organized. We'll call this shell grenade mid. Sure. Awesome. So with this duplicate of my poly group here, I'm going to go ahead and hold Control and Shift. Now we're going to go back to that same menu we were at earlier, but if we, instead of clicking and dragging, if we just tap, we're going to be able to isolate and solo a selection of polygons, which is exactly what we want, because now we can go into our menu over here, go to Geometry, and under our Modify Topology option, there is this menu called Delete Hidden. So now, if I hold Control and Shift and tap, we have no other geometry here. And if I unsolo that, we can see that we have this shell around the grenade, which is awesome, because now we can create this cool looking shape on the outside without actually having to select polygons. And the way we're going to do that is using something called Dynamic Subdivision. Now, before we go any further, I just want to let you know that I'm also very lazy. And what that means is that I don't want to have to keep diving into all of these menus. So if you select this button in the top right-hand corner up here, we can go ahead and create a quick menu or a custom bar. We can basically customize our own user interface for ZBrush. So under this quick menu here, if I see the little dots down here near the bottom of my menu, we can see that I can swipe, and I have all these different custom menus that I've made for my own workflow. So with this, I have this menu for my dynamic subdivision. Now I'm going to show you how to get there manually to start. So we're going to go to the tool menu, go to geometry, and we're going to scroll up until we find dynamic subdivision over here, and I'm going to just turn that on. And what that's going to do, if we solo it, it's going to try and subdivide and smooth our geometry. But instead of just smoothing, what I want to do is under my dynamic subdivision, if I bring this menu down, I'm going to go ahead and turn on flat subdivision. And what that's going to do is basically add more geometry without actually changing the shape first, and then it'll smooth it. So I'm going to just turn that down. We're going to add even maybe 1 and 2, maybe just to soften it just a little bit. So 1 flat, 2 in the smooth subdivision. But my favorite part about dynamic subdivision is this thickness slider. So if I turn off my solo, we can see here that we're definitely getting some clipping geometry. But if I go into my thickness and just increase this just a touch, like so, now we're getting this shell around the outside of our grenade. I can also turn on and off this post subdivision. This will either soften it or sharpen it. And I can turn on segments, which will basically, if we zoom in real close here, let's go ahead and solo that. If we go to my dynamic subdivision and go to my segments, we can see here that's going to add more subdivisions in the very center of our thickness if we wanted to add that. So I'll just keep this at 2 for now. And now the last thing we need to cover under our thickness is going to be this offset. When we look at the offset here, it's going to push the thickness either inwards or outwards. If you go into the negative value, it's going to push it inwards, but we don't want it to go inwards. We're going to go positive and go outward. So now if we unsolo this, we can see that we have this cool looking shell on the outside of our grenade, which is pretty cool. So now we can go ahead and add some other shapes to this if we wanted to. So we have a cool looking shape here, and if I go ahead and turn off my wireframe, we have this cool looking thing. The problem is all of our other meshes in our project are a little chunky still. So I'm going to hold Alt and select this mesh, and I'm going to go ahead and turn dynamic subdivision on everything. So if I go to this quick menu right here, as I was talking about earlier, we can swipe and we can see I have all my menus down here until I get to dynamic subdivision. Now we can see here that the top of the grenade is getting a little soft. And the reason why it's getting soft is because if we go ahead and look at our wireframe with this LF button, we can see here that the edges don't have any support loops or extra edges around the sides to help support that sharpness. There's a couple ways we can solve this. What I'm going to do just on the ZBrush iPad version to start is I'm going to first go into my geometry options, and under geometry we are going to find something called panel loops. I'm sorry, not panel loops, I mean edge loops. And under edge loops we're going to click delete loops. Now we can see here that all the vertical loops, or the lines running horizontal on this cylinder, are gone. But that's okay. If we go ahead and dynamic subdivision, it's going to break. Trust me, that's not what we want. But this is just me trying to keep things low poly. If we go outside of edge loops, so we removed all the edge loops with the edge loop feature and delete loops. But now what we're going to do is we're going to go to crease. And if we find this option called crease, it will go ahead and try and crease based on the angle of our mesh. So now if we go ahead and select crease and then we hit dynamic, it's going to keep it nice and sharp. And now if I turn off my wireframe, we can see here that we're definitely adding a lot more geometry. It's not looking quite as chunky, but it is definitely going to give us a much more pleasing look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of my meshes and just go ahead and crease everything and apply dynamic subdivision. So I will just go ahead and select, hold Alt, crease, hold Alt, and crease, hold Alt, and I see I have a mask here. I'll uncrease that, or unmask that, and then I will go to crease, and then one more time hold Alt, and I will crease, and then I will now go in and dynamic, hold Alt, and with my custom menu, I'm going into dynamic subdivision. Again, you could just go into your geometry, hide that menu, find your dynamic subdivision over there, and just add all of your dynamic subdivision that way. So just a lot of little repeated steps, but that's why you have the custom menus, to do all the custom menu stuff. Cool. Okay, so we want to add some of the more fun hard surface detail to this. We're going to do that with something called Live Boolean. What Live Boolean does is it basically cuts out portions of your mesh based on intersections of the geometry. So let's say I wanted to add a little piece in the center of my grenade mid that's going to help create this really cool shape. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my subtool menu. I'm going to hit the plus sign. So we're going to hit the plus button, and we're going to go ahead and add a circle 3D. It's basically going to be like a disc right here. Now, this disc here, if I go to my solo mode, is basically, if we turn on my wireframe and turn off my subtool menu, it's a circle. Awesome. Well, if you go to the gizmo mode, we're going to go ahead and make sure that this is directly at world center. And then we're going to hit the cog wheel and go to this thing called the extender. And what the extender does is gives us a bunch of scary arrows, but we can just click and drag on one of them. It's going to help us elongate the shape of our mesh without adjusting the circular curvature of our mesh. Now, if I hold my quick menu and go to dynamic subdivision, we can see that's a nice circle around that edge. Now, to make this a little bit easier and give us a little bit more geometry, I'm going to go ahead and hit the cog wheel and hit accept. I'm going to hit save, and then I'm going to go back to my cog wheel again and go to extender and just extend it up one more time. Gotta make sure we select the right button, extender, and drag up. And now we're adding, we can see another extension in the center of that poly group there. And then go ahead and turn off my solo, and I'm gonna select my cog wheel, accept, and go to my cog wheel or my gizmo and scale it down. Now, if I select this button right here, this is basically transparency. I'm gonna make sure that I set my size to be, let's say we'll put it right there at the height of my mesh, or of my shell. We'll actually make it a little bit smaller. What if we set that right there? So now we have this shape that's kind of within the boundaries of that shell. And now if we go ahead, put that there, sure, cool. From here, I can do a couple things. One, I'm going to go ahead and solo this, and if I turn on my dynamic subdivision, make sure that's on. If I don't like the menu being directly in the center of my screen, I can just click these arrows to bring it to the left or right, and then I'm going to set my thickness to be pretty thick, to be honest. Like, let's just say 0.2. So now we have a nice thick mesh, maybe a little too much, like maybe 0.01. Sure. So here we have our mesh, and if we go to our menu, we have this geometry, we have all of our subtools. They have this thing called array mesh, and under array mesh, I have the ability to duplicate or clone my mesh across. So the first thing I do is I hit transpose and lock position. Now, because I already went through this tutorial, I already have some of these menus already set, but if I set my repeat to like 12, sure, the default will be set to offset, but I want to set this to rotate, and I want the Y amount to be 360 degrees. And the reason why we do that is if we go to the side view, if we rotate with this little dude right here, and we move our gizmo out, we can see that all these clones are being cloned around the outside of our mesh. Now we can see here that there's some weird things happening with our mesh. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my menu, and we have these weird jaggedy lines. Those are because of the creases. So I go to geometry, and I'm going to go to uncrease all, and that should, yeah, that definitely helps soften that up a little bit. So only the outside now is going to give us that harsh edge. Now if we unsolo that and we go ahead and look at our mesh from the top view, we are now getting a clone around the outside of our mesh. And the fun part about this is that if I just set this to just the outside, just barely outside the shell, we are going to get a really cool looking effect when we turn on our live Boolean. Now, if we go to our tool menu and hold select on this subtool that we have, and we'll go to Boolean process, and we'll set this to subtraction. Now, if we turn on our live Boolean and turn off our wireframe, and we select another mesh, this should, oh, come on, dude. Why are you being weird? It's just Boolean process, subtraction, cool. Aha, there we go. Okay, that was so weird. I don't know why it wasn't working. There we go. So now we have this cool mesh being cut out on the outside of our mesh. It kind of gives me some like Star Wars vibes, because you get those like super cool oblong shapes. Very Empire-y, if you ask me. Now, I don't like how this cutout here is going along our little shell, so I'm going to go ahead and go to my array mesh and set this amount to, instead of 12, I'll set this to like 8. And that should, yeah, there we go. So now, oh yeah, we got a little oval thing on that little bit right there. And then we also have one directly in the center of that, because symmetry is nice. Awesome. I apologize for all the little fumbles for the live Boolean part. But yeah, that's basically the first step for creating some cool shapes that are custom and to your own. Now, what if we wanted to do something around the top and create some other cool looking shapes? What I can do here is I'm going to go ahead and make a new subtool. Let's go ahead and select this top one and add a cube. And we're basically going to do the same thing. We're going to go to the very top. First, make it a little tinier. We're going to go ahead and make it thinner, like so. And what I'm going to try and do here is I am going to go to my Z remesher, and I'm going to make sure I turn on detect edges and then Z remesh that. So now if I look at my wireframe after I close Z remesher and turn off live Boolean, yeah, we have a pretty dense mesh, which is pretty much what I want, because I'm going to go ahead and go to my bend curve here. But before I do that, I'm going to hit save. Just save early, save often. Go to my cog wheel, bend curve, and now if I bring this out, I just want to make a kind of match the curvature of the circle that I have. This would actually be a lot easier if I go ahead and go to my Gizmo 3D and put that there, make it a little bit tinier, and then I want to try and match the curvature of that one more time. So let's go to my, no, we don't want a cylinder. Too fast, Jags. Go ahead and match that right there. Cool. And then, yeah, I'm good with that for now. Let's go ahead and accept that. Let's go ahead and bring this down. And then I'm going to go ahead and put this directly in the home, because we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go to Subtool, Array Mesh on, Transpose, Lock Position. I will set this to repeat around 4. I will set the Rotate on, and then set the Y amount to 360. Bam. And now, if I look from the top, let's reposition this, look from the top, and then pull this out. Go to my Subtool menu over here. Let's go ahead and set the Boolean process to Subtraction, and turn on live Boolean, turn off my wireframe, and now we can just pull that out. And now we have this cool looking shape around that, which is pretty awesome. Now, what I'm also going to do is I am going to go to my Subtool menu. I'm going to duplicate this, and then I'm going to bring this in just a little bit, like so. And I'll pull it up just a touch. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Subtool menu, and I'm going to go all the way to the bottom of my Array Mesh menu, and I'm going to hit Make Mesh. Now it's basically going to take all these clones and duplicate them. So now if I hold Alt and then center that up, I can hold Shift with my Gizmo and rotate this by 45 degrees. And now we're going to get a really cool looking shape that's kind of offset around that. I guess I also very well could have just applied the Boolean and duplicated that. But now what we can do is go ahead and set this, make sure that this is also set to Subtraction. And now pull it up just a touch. And we have a cool looking shape around that edge. I realize this little top piece is now a little too big for those cuts, so I'll just make that a little bit smaller, maybe make it a touch taller, like that. And we have a really cool looking array mesh. Now, what if you're too lazy, like me, and you don't want to make all of your custom shapes? Well, what you can do is you can go into your plus symbol here. Let's go ahead and just add a sphere. We're going to make it real tiny. Gizmo. Real tiny. And then from here, we're actually going to pull it outside of the mesh so it doesn't cause any weird issues with our Boolean. If we from here go to our Subtool menu, set this to Boolean process and Subtraction. So now it's going to cut anything outside, but there's nothing with the sphere there. If we go to our brush menu in the top left-hand corner, we have this thing called Insert Meshes, and there's this other really cool brush tool called Boolean. Now we can go ahead and select the Boolean IMM brush, turn that off, and we get all these cool brushes that come with ZBrush. And if I go ahead and select, one of my favorites for stuff like this is going to be the holes right there. So now if I go ahead and look at the very top, I'm going to go ahead and turn on symmetry. I'm going to symmetrize on the Z and turn off the X for now. And I will first just click and drag. Oh, let's go ahead and not mask that. Click and drag, and now we are creating a really cool looking shape right there with our sphere that's set to a negative mask. And if we go ahead and turn off live Boolean, whenever we draw with any of these IMM brushes, we're basically cutting into our mesh. Now, again, I'm lazy. What if I want to duplicate this oval shape around the entirety of my mesh? Well, if under Symmetrize here, we not only have X, Z, and Y symmetry, but we also have radial. So if I set this to radial and I turn on the Y and turn off the Z, and let's go to, I don't know, what would be a cool one? Maybe this power detail right here, and snap directly in the center of my mesh with live Boolean turned on. And just draw. Oh, come on. You know what? It's being funky, so we're going to go back to the power detail. And if we go ahead and turn off our gizmo and just draw with live Boolean turned off, go directly in the center like so. Then if we turn on our gizmo, it'll give us our gizmo directly on that. We can just push that in just a little bit. And now we turn on live Boolean. There we go. Oh, come on, dude. Go to my sphere. Boolean process, subtraction. Boolean process, addition, Boolean process, subtraction, set you below. The order of your Boolean process does matter. And now, there we go. So the one thing I did not set is that my Boolean process, the hierarchy of meshes, does count. But now we can go through and find, I don't know, what's this joint create thing? Go here, draw, there we go. Cool, funky mesh like so. Now, I know this is a really long tutorial, so I hope you're enjoying this. I'm going to show you one more thing. How do you create that little latch, the little thing that happens for the hand grenade? So quickly blowing through this, we're going to go ahead and add a cube. We're going to go ahead and with this cube, look at it from the direct center. And I am going to go to my gizmo and set this to a polycube. If I look at the polycube, if I go to my gizmo, Gizmo 3D, scale it up, and look at my wireframe, turn off live Boolean. Now we have a cube that has four cuts on either side, which is awesome, cool. But what I do want to do is I actually want to make this less polygons. So the way to do that is we're going to go to my subtool menu over here. We're going to go to initialize. We're going to go to 0, 1, 1, and 1 and Q cube and scale it up. So now we have a polygon on either side, and from here, pull this up, turn on live Boolean for now, just so we know where this is going. Put that there. Cool. Put that there. Okay. So we have our thing. We're going to go to our brush menu in the top left-hand corner. Going to just select any other brush because we just didn't want that giant menu at the top. Turn off live Boolean for now. I want to be able to move some of these pieces. So we're going to go back to our trim curve, clip curve. So remember at the beginning of the tutorial we have the mask and shift. We're going to select the slice curve. There we go. If we click and drag there, we're going to go ahead and add a polygroup, which is what we want, because now what we can do is hold Control and Shift and add another polygroup. I'm going to go ahead and push this over there, center that up. Now from here, if I hold Control and Shift, or Control and Alt the mask and the minus button and make a box around this. I'm going to select only this portion of the mesh, and if I go to my gizmo, center this up, and if I hold Alt or the plus minus and the home, we can now just move these polygons over. Cool. I'll rotate these down just a little bit. We'll turn off the gizmo, Control and Shift, make another slice curve, and then Control Mask. We'll just drag outside the mesh and then reselect these guys over here and pull these down. Maybe make that a bit smaller. And then pull that down. Maybe just a touch larger. Oh, there's someone at my door.
Eventually.
Oh, this tutorial is a really long one, but I had so many things I wanted to share that all my groceries that I ordered came in, so I hope you're enjoying this so far. But we're going to go ahead and finish this up real quick. Go back. We're going to turn off my gizmo. Control, slice one more time. Make that cut. And then we're going to go to Control, clear the mask by holding Control and making a mask outside, and that will clear my mask. Control and Alt, select my mask and gizmo, hold Alt, center that up, and pull that down. And now we have this shape. Let's go ahead and clear the mask, look from the side. Let's go ahead and pull that in so it's not quite as much, like so. And now from here, I will go ahead, Control, Alt, and select these guys and center up my mask. Now, again, I'm just holding Alt and going to my gizmo, and then if I hold Alt and with the unlock, basically we have everything unlocked, we can reposition that, and now we can just turn this just a little bit and just create some other interesting shapes. Here, Control, Alt, drag out, Alt, reset, reposition, and then we'll clear the mask, Control Alt, select these points, hold Alt, center that up, and then maybe give that something that looks a little bit more like a bevel edge right there, thinner there, and then here from the top view, we will go ahead and Control Alt, Control clear the mask, Control Alt, select you guys, center up, and sometimes the gizmo looks a little funky. I'll just widen that out just a little bit. And then there we go. Cool. Now we have this cool looking sort of grenade sort of thing. Turn off my wireframe, and this is not a bad start. Could be better. Spent a little bit more time on the original grenade that I made, but long story short, this is basically all the techniques. We created the shell by creating a mask and our wireframes. We did our live Boolean. We duplicated meshes, and we kind of just covered a lot of the basics of ZBrush for iPad. So I hope you learned something on the iPad. If you did, let me know in the comment section down below. If you liked this, questions, comments, concerns, whatever else, comment section is down there for that. Thanks for watching my face for this long. I hope the time was worth it because you're not getting it back, but I'll leave you with the final tip. As always, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Make some gains. Goodbye, my friends. Bye.